Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Sustaining a Stance of Kindness, led by Dr. Sufna John, licensed psychologist, associate professor, co-director of Arkansas Building Effective Services for Trauma, and clinical director of the Arkansas Trauma Resource Initiative for Schools. My name is Laura Landers, and I'll be your web monitor for today. Before we get started, I just want to let you know a little bit about ARBEST and do some housekeeping announcements. Arkansas Building Effective Services for Trauma, or ARBEST, is a state-funded program at the UAMS Psychiatric Research Institute, and our aim is to improve mental health services for children and families who've experienced trauma. We work closely with multiple partners to build a more trauma-informed state, and we're probably best known for providing training to mental health professionals on treatments that are effective with helping children and families recover from trauma. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can feel free to type them into the chat and we can answer them as we go along. And you can also use the chat feature for any comments or responses. If you're interested in earning a CEU, just stick around till the very end and I'll give you a few more instructions on how to obtain that. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page and like us. That's where we most frequently post about upcoming webinars and training opportunities. And this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel after the webinar. So today we have a presenter who I really love working with. Dr. Sufna John is a licensed psychologist and associate professor at UAMS. She specializes in infant and early childhood mental health and intergenerational trauma. She serves as the co-director for the ARBEST program and the co-director for the UAMS Complex Trauma Assessment Program and clinical director for our TRIS program. So with that, Sufna, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Laura. We have a question that came in about activating the chat. Can we just get a sense of whether folks are able to put things into the chat? So if you go down to the bottom of your screen in Zoom, you should see a chat feature. And let's see whether folks are able to type anything into the chat before we go ahead and get started.
Perfect. So it should be working now.
Perfect. Awesome. Wonderful. Yay. Good. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you in the chat. So just to give you a heads up on webinar mode, what this means is that I can't see you, but I can see what you're saying in the chat. Okay. So you're not going to be able to give me any nonverbals that you have a question, but I have the chat open on my opposite screen. So please feel free to use the chat, not only to participate, because I'll be asking you questions and getting you involved, but also if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat and I'll do my best to monitor that. So as you can see, I'll probably be glancing back and forth every once in a while because the chat is on my other screen. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started today. All right, here's my first check. Can someone put in the chat, are you able to see this full screen slide? Where you're able to see my full screen. It should say sustaining a stance of kindness. Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Amy. Look, okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, y'all. Okay. So we're going to be talking today about sustaining a stance of kindness in our work. And before we get started, I want to make sure that you have a solid understanding of who I am and how that influences the way I approach the topic we're going to talk about today. So as Laura mentioned, some of this in my bio, I'm a licensed child psychologist, and I really specialize in not only trauma in the youngest of our populations, but how do we really help families where there seems to be a repeating pattern over time of trauma, unfortunately, where grandparents have a similar trauma history to their children who have a similar trauma history to their children. I'm one of the co-directors of the ARBEST program, and so it's lovely to see so many people on our webinar. I'm also a state trainer in child parent psychotherapy in DC 0 to 5. So I already recognize some faces, I should say names in the chat, and it's nice to see you again. But I might see you within that context too, if you ever decide to take a CPP training or one of our DC 0 to 5 trainings. And I'm really passionate about the idea of understanding who people are at their core and how that translates to us supporting them to the best of our ability. I have a few hopes for today. One of my hopes is to balance giving you information with allowing you space to reflect and integrate that information. And so this is hopefully not going to feel like one of those talks where I'm just like spitting out all sorts of information at you, and you kind of leave after an hour with a whirlwind of facts moving around in your head, but not a whole lot of time to process those. So what you might notice today is there are times for us to sit back and reflect and think about the content. I really hope to create an environment in which you feel inclined to share your thoughts, your reactions, and even counterpoints to what we're discussing. And what a counterpoint basically means is, interesting, Sufna, that you mentioned this because I actually see it a different way. This is how I experience that thing, that wouldn't be seen as disrespectful or disruptive. Actually, it's really nice when we can create an environment in which people can all share their viewpoints, even if those viewpoints don't always agree with each other. We have a lot of unique insight as a part of this group, and I'm hopeful that you will feel comfortable enough to share it. And then finally, we just have an hour today. And so I'm hoping what this presentation does is spark some ongoing reflection and action in you as well, to be really thinking about this topic for a little while longer, not just for the time that we have today. Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit on how we can make sure today is as helpful as possible. I want to give you a few things that I'm bringing into our presentation. The first is a belief in benevolence. What this basically means is I genuinely believe, this is genuine, I genuinely believe that most people are doing the best they can with what they have and what they know and what their environment allows them to do. And so what that means here is I'm going to assume the best of intentions from you too. You took a Friday to come to a presentation. You're probably here because it means something to you. And so I'm going to be giving you the benefit of the doubt. And I want us to be able to give each other the benefit of the doubt because we're in learning mode when we're in a webinar, right? Like we're all here to learn something. And sometimes learning means that we don't always get it right. I think about like when babies learn to walk, they fall all the time. And that doesn't mean they're failing at walking. That just means that failure is a part of learning, right? That mistakes and stumbles are a part of learning. And this is a place to learn. I'd rather you stumble here than stumble with a family for the first time, right? So it's okay to share genuine reactions without worrying that, oh no, this might be a stumble. We're here, the stumbling's okay in this learning environment. Okay, there are multiple methods for you to participate. So not only can you internally reflect on things, I also encourage you to use the chat to reflect. And finally, that you might have mirror and window moments here. What a mirror moment is someone shares something and you're like, whoa, I could have typed that myself, or I could have said that myself. I really see you in this moment. This is a mirror. I can see myself reflected in you. But there are also window moments, moments where that might not be our experience, but thank you for letting me have a vantage point into that experience, that you've allowed me to see something I might not have been able to see or experience something I might not have thought of yet. And that would be a window. So I hope you have some of both of those things, moments where you feel really connected to the community because you see yourself and the things that are coming out, but also moments that maybe challenge you or get you to spark some reflections on things you hadn't thought about before. Okay. So let's jump in a little bit into reflective space with a question about the idea that this work changes us in fundamental ways. And I'm curious from you in the chat, how has your job changed the way you see the world? I know we don't all have the same job, but a lot of what unites us is working with children and families who have experienced trauma. I'm curious if anyone's willing to share, how has your job changed the way that you see the world? I'm going to give us a little bit of time. Patricia said, like, it just built some compassion and understanding in me. Emily, this idea of like humility. Not everyone had the same resources and has the same resources as me. Beth is showing me like things aren't always cut and dry or black and white, that there's a lot of gray involved. Violetta, to be more understanding. There's gratitude in here, trying to hold spaces. Telia's talking about like seeing things much more differently. I'll leave it a little bit more time because I know some folks have different timing that it takes to kind of formulate your words and your thoughts. What's interesting to me is a lot of these initial sentiments, I would say, are positively valenced. Something like that means it's like a hopeful or an optimistic, or it's helped me grow, it's helped me change. Yeah, there's a lot of humility themes coming into the chat about how this work has humbled me and made me realize there's so much more than I realized was happening. I'm curious, have there been any ways this work has changed you and made you see the world in maybe not as positive or hopeful or optimistic of a way? And I'll take a risk by sharing that first. This work has also exposed me to some of the worst things about this world. And it's brought anger into my life. It's brought me feeling resentful at times, me feeling really frustrated by the world. And I think I had a worldview maybe before this job that if you make good choices and you do good things, you'll reap good things. And I think what this work has done for me is shown me that, like, that's not always true. Like, the world isn't fair in a lot of ways. And I think that has been something that has sparked not necessarily like positive emotions in me. I'm hearing some of that, like, I feel stuck, I feel frustrated. Oh, bet that it's affecting me as a mama. It's not just affecting me as a professional, it's affecting me as a person in the relationships I have with people in my life. Emily, you're talking about like it's changed the way I express emotions. And Jennifer talking about like it's brought fear into my life. And what I appreciate here in the chat is this nuanced idea of how the work has changed us, that many of us would say there are beautiful, positive ways the way this work has changed us, but also that there are ways this work has changed us that may not be always positively felt. I think a lot of you have already answered this question of how has this work made you a kinder person? It's made you someone who's more balanced, who's more hopeful, who's more less judgmental about the world. I wonder about this third question. What do you think makes kindness difficult to sustain within our work? What are the things that happen that make us have trouble holding on to grace and kindness? Ooh, April, one word sums it up, huh? Burnout. Yeah, like burnout can make it really difficult for me to stay engaged. Amanda's talking about like judgments that come to my mind. Yeah. Emily talking about like, is it weak to be kind? Is it naive to be kind? I think is a lot of times some language that I hear. I love seeing all this participation from y'all in the chat. Ooh, Erica, we get desensitized. Oh, yeah. Like how many of us have sat in a room with a client and felt that feeling that like, I've heard this all before. And like, I know for myself as someone who got into this work partly because like I want to make the world better for my kids. It can be frustrating to feel like, am I making any progress at all? Am I doing anything in this world at all? Right? Like sometimes it can feel like with problems this big that am I really doing anything of value or anything of meaning? Y'all are bringing up so many important things in the chat. And what I'm hopeful is that this has brought some mirror moments to you in hearing your colleagues talk about things that maybe feel familiar to you. You know, because this work in some ways is a recipe for hard things. There's a lot of dialectics in the work that we are going to do together. Dialectic means that two things can seem counter to one another, but they can be true at the same time, okay? Let me give you one of my favorite dialectics as a therapist is I accept you for who you are, and I want you to change. That it doesn't seem like those two things could be true at the same time, but I think many therapists would feel like that absolutely is true, that we're accepting of the people in front of us and we want to help them bring out change into their life, that both of those things are possible. And I'm really going to encourage you as a part of today to become an and person, not a but person. And what I mean by that is you can hold more than one thing without negating one thing. So for example, I am part of a system that hurts a lot of people. And I'm trying so hard to do good in this world that both of those things could be true. I think about that sometimes as someone who works a lot with the child welfare system, that system does hurt a lot of people. And I'm trying so hard to like do good and to keep kids safe, that children deserve to be safe and adults deserve real opportunities to become safer, that both of those things are true at the same time. And the dialectic that I hope we talk about today is that there is room for kindness and anger in our work, that there is room for kindness and rage, kindness and frustration, that there's lots of emotions that our work brings up in us, and that we need to have a way to process and metabolize all those various emotions in our work that come up. Because our work is tough. It brings up intense feelings. It has really high stakes in people's life. It's often very personal to us. It is relentless. It is ongoing. It naturally pushes us to feel very urgent. It's often done by team members who have different training, different roles, different values, different lived experiences. And that all of that together can be a recipe for dysregulation, where we feel really uneasy and we're more likely to make impulsive, judgmental decisions and be less in control of our thoughts and behaviors when we are dysregulated. Okay. I'm curious if anybody has a thought they're willing to share with this last question of what judgments do you notice you jump to when you are dysregulated? Oh, Patricia, right away, they aren't trying or not trying hard enough, right? They're just making excuses. When I'm dysregulated, I'm likely to look at someone else's behavior in a less kind way. That nobody cares. Oh, I have had this experience of sitting in a team and being like, am I the only one who cares about this? When clearly, of course, I'm not the only one who cares about it, but it can feel that way when we're dysregulated. Yeah, that maybe Tequila, we feel like they just want to be in this mess. They're not doing anything to break this cycle. Yeah, that I might take things more personally, that it's not something about the work, it's something about me. Like people don't value me. Chanel, like I don't do enough. Right? That I might really jump to these more reactive, less responsive. Jamie, what a segue. Exactly. That I might be much less intentional in my work because I'm doing things more impulsively. And our work naturally creates a lot of dysregulation. So I'm going to show you a video, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how the tone we set matters a lot to the families that we serve and the people we work alongside of. Okay, so I'm going to push play on this video. Can y'all hear that sound?
There's something inside. Can you see what's inside the box? You can take the lid off. Is there something in there? There's a green cone. You want to put it back inside of the box? And put the lid back on the box? And close it up? Can I see that? Thank you. Let's see what else we have. Look at this. See? Look at this. There.
Hi, Teresa. I'm going to sit here and read a magazine.
Okay. That's Kelly. Kelly's going to sit and read a magazine. Kelly, look at this.
That's aggravating. That's so annoying.
Oh, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's just your opinion. It's aggravating.
Here. Can I see that? Thank you.
I'm going to go now, Teresa.
Kelly's going bye-bye. he went. Bye-bye.
Okay. Wow is right, Beth? I am curious from y'all. What do you notice about this behavior? What are you pulling out of this video? And how does it relate to kindness? Can't you tell I'm an infant and early child person, right? With some of the videos I'm going to show to you and pull for you. But what are you picking up about tone and how this might relate to kindness today? Yeah. That even a toddler can read the room and go, ooh, this is not a place that I'm going to explore, that I'm going to play. I want you to realize at no point did the name of the person who was emoting was Kelly. At no point did Kelly hit someone. Kelly didn't use profanity. Kelly didn't scream at someone. Kelly didn't use her body in a very physically threatening way. And yet we still see that it impacts people to bear witness to unkindness. Okay. And what's really important about this for us to remember is I'm not just talking about the families you serve will pick up on your unkindness and it will change the way they feel safe. I'm also talking about the people you work alongside of. Because I don't know if you know this already, but those of us who went into the helping professionals, statistically, we have higher rates of childhood trauma than the general population. So when we talk about how people and their nervous systems change with trauma and how they may be more attuned or more noticing of the environment that they're in and cues for safety, we're not just talking about the kids and families in your office. I'm talking about the therapist next door to you. I'm talking about the attorney that you work with on a multidisciplinary team. I'm talking about an intern that you have in your program, that this isn't just about the families we serve. It's also about the work we do alongside each other. Okay. So let's reflect and think about a time you did not show up as your most benevolent, trauma-informed selves. Remember, I am already assuming your kindness, your grace, your commitment to this job. Why would you do this if you didn't have those traits about you? But I want you to think about a time you did not show up as that version of yourself. You showed up as a version of yourself that was less kind, that was less benevolent, that was more reactive, that was less trauma-informed. What is the story behind why you showed up that way? By the way, you're welcome to use the chat or you're welcome to just self-reflect on this. Why did you show up in that way? What was happening that contributed to you not showing up in the way you wanted to in this moment? Okay. I'll tell you that sometimes for me, times where I don't show up as my most benevolent self is times when the topic we're talking about is personally impactful to me. It might be because it reminds me of something I went through, or it makes me really angry because I had a client that went through something like this. Could be like stuff was happening in my life that impacted the way I showed up. Violeta's talking about like when I was going through a divorce and the stress I had. Anita's talking about that overwhelmed and stressed feeling. I felt threatened, Paula said. I felt stress, Marilyn said. And that I wonder, did people know that was happening for you? Did they have that context? So they weren't just interpreting what they saw, but what they didn't see too? And did you ever revisit this interaction? And if so, how did you approach it? Oh, Steve's talking about like sometimes our colleagues ping for us other people in our life or other lived experiences that we have, and we might react to them based on that familiarity, right? And I wonder if we can flip this lens of compassion, because most of us in this moment probably needed someone to give us the benefit of the doubt. They needed to see us show up in that way and go, that's not who Sufna is, though. That this is not a great moment of Sufna, but that's not who Sufna is, right? And I want to see, are we extending that benevolence to people when they do this to us? So when they show up in moments that they are not their best selves, they are not their most benevolent, they are not their trauma informed, do you know the story behind why that is occurring? And would you be more kind and compassionate if you did? Remember those things you put in the chat earlier about when you're confronted with colleagues? Sometimes there's those assumptions of like, they're not trying hard enough. They don't care about this the way that I do. I wonder about how we interpret moments of hardship in the people who surround us. Yeah. April, a really honest self-reflection here about like, I didn't react in ways that were kind for either of us. Ooh, we haven't talked about this yet, but April, your comment made me think, when I show up in a way that's unkind to others, not only is that a problem for them, but it also doesn't make me feel good to show up in an unkind way. Because I hope I'm a kind person. So when I show up in a way that's not kind, I don't feel good about it either. Like this wasn't doing me any favors either when I showed up in this way. Okay. But I wonder if when we're faced with unkindness, how we could move from a place of judgment to a place of compassion. Yeah, while knowing everybody's going through something, right? And I try to practice this kindness daily. I love that emphasized try, right? None of us are nailing this every time, but that I'm making a sincere, intentional effort to do that. And I think one of the ways that we can prevent unkindness is through regulation. What that means is if I'm at a calmer state of body and mind, I'm more able to intentionally go, hey, I want to give this person compassion, or I don't want to react in this way that's judgmental or impulsive. But we need to have regulated bodies in order to be making those types of decisions. So what I want you to do is start recognizing what are your personal cues for dysregulation and how do you invest in strategies you could do publicly. Okay. And what I mean by that is one of my favorite regulation strategies is reading a book. Okay. I'm a like voracious reader. I read almost all the time. And that really helps regulate my body and calm me. But I couldn't do that. Let's say I got dysregulated while I'm a witness on the stand. I can't just pull out a book and start reading to regulate my body, right? That's not a strategy that's practical for me to do in public. And so I'm curious, what do folks do in the moment that they could do publicly to help them regulate? Patricia's putting in one, right? I pray. So that's something I can do internally that maybe I could still do in public that would help me to regulate. I'm curious, folks, help a friend here. Like put in the chat, what do you do that helps you regulate that you could do in public? Beth, yours made me crack up because I am totally someone who regulates off temperature and beverages. So I usually have multiple beverages in front of me. Like I have a diet soda here that's really cold. A lot of times I'll have like a hot tea with me too that I regulate via temperature. Definitely. Oh, Beth, like checking my self-talk, deep breathing. Oh, Amy, another sensory one, like eating a ginger chew or a gum, something sensory, right? Like, can I close and use some imagery to help? Ooh, Clarissa, I've never even heard of anywhere yoga before, but I love those two words put together, that there are some types of body-based strategies I can use. Okay. I usually have like lotion or something. I usually have fidgets at my desk that I can use because using energy helps me to regulate. Y'all are coming up with really good examples. Okay. And what I want you to do is realize that not only do we need to be very good at regulating, we also need to be supportive of what are things we can do to help others in our life regulate. Okay. Because kindness is much easier to do from a regulated body. And so one way to regulate that's not a body-based way is to change the way we are thinking and perceiving. And benevolence, that idea of believing the best in other people, is actually one of the most proven strategies to regulate ourselves. That when we go through the world believing the best in others, that actually helps you regulate your own self. A stance of benevolence is really compatible with a stance of kindness. So benevolence can really help you authentically adopt a regulated stance. Okay. But here's the deal about benevolence. Okay, this idea of I have optimism for others and belief in others is I have no desire to help you fake feeling compassionately connected and benevolent towards others. Because a really strong predictor of burnout is performing feelings we don't actually authentically experience. Okay. Have y'all ever heard that term compassion fatigue? This idea that like the more compassionate I feel towards others is draining. It's actually interesting because when we look at the research, genuine compassion is not draining. Genuine compassion, when we feel that for others in our job, we actually tend to feel more invigorated, refreshed, and regulated. It gives us motivation and energy. What actually drains our energy isn't feeling compassion, it's faking it. It's performing compassion. You know, like have we ever been in those meetings where we are feeling unkind towards another person, but we just fake it and pretend like we care? Y'all, right? Like you don't have to type in yes to this. I'm pretty confident all of us have been in the situation where we are kind of performing kindness or compassion. We're faking it as opposed to genuinely feeling it. Okay. So my goal of today's session is to replace performance kindness with genuine kindness. I have no desire to give you a false sense of positivity and kindness. I want you to genuinely feel it and feel committed to kindness in yourself and others. Okay. And so let's talk about sharing some wisdom here. What's something you wish people in your life knew so they would have more grace for you or the role that you play? I'm a therapist who sometimes sits on multidisciplinary teams of people who aren't therapists. And one of the things I wish they knew was like how hard it is to listen to really painful stories in other people all the time. To have a job where you're holding the grief of so many people is really hard. So like when I'm in a team meeting and I get riled up sometimes, please understand that that's coming from a place where like I've heard the worst things this person has had to experience. Of course, I'm fired up. Like I've had to bear witness to that. That's going to change the way I am in meetings. And I wish that people knew that. Right. And so I'm curious from anyone here, are there other things you wish people knew and you think they would have more genuine kindness and grace for you if they knew that? Chanel, I'm so empathic, like that I'm often burdened by the emotions that I take on of others. Ugh, right? Like we've all had that walk out to the parking lot where we feel so heavy and so sad from all of the things that we have shared with others in our job, right? But maybe if we knew how to find genuine compassion and kindness for ourselves and others, this wouldn't be performance art. We wouldn't be faking kindness, which is going to burn us out. We'd instead be really feeling it more often. Oh, Jennifer, here's another one. Oh, a lot of these are coming in now. Like, I wish people knew this. I wish people knew like what I need after a day like this. I wish people knew like what's in my control and out of my control, Jennifer, right? Like I wish people knew the limits of what I can do, right? These are great, y'all. And so we are going to stick with this theme for the rest of today. How can we replace performance kindness with genuine kindness? Okay, so let's start with what does genuine empathy and kindness actually look like? Right? How can we tell when it's happening? And maybe how can we tell in ourselves or others when we've started to get into the performance art of kindness and we're not in our genuine empathy state? Okay, so first let's talk about empathy. Some of you might have seen this video already. This is Brene Brown's video on empathy, but I think it's a nice centering for us so we know we're talking about a similar thing when we think about kindness.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy: perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right. I'm curious to hear your reactions to this idea of like, what does kindness and empathy look like in practice? And what are ways that we perform empathy, we say the right thing that may not be helpful for people in that moment? I'm glad you like it, Crystal. I really love that video too. Anyone have reactions to this version of empathy and kindness? I'll give it just a minute. Yeah. Trisha talking about like active listening is a really important part of kindness. And I would add to that, not listening so my argument to you is better, but listening because I genuinely want to understand your perspective. Like that's a really different reason I'm listening. Yeah, this idea of like understanding and validating the feelings in front of you. You know, some of these concepts are probably not unfamiliar to you because this is what we do as therapists and counselors. Erica, this idea of like, I try to see myself in you and connect to something in me to connect to you. Yeah, that like giving people a place to grieve and share in an authentic way is really kind. And I'm hoping that that's one of the themes that pulls out from you today is kindness is only kind when it's authentic. That like we want to strive for authentic kindness, not faking kindness, really authentic kindness. It's much easier to sustain something you genuinely feel than it is to sustain something you're faking. Okay. Yeah, Shayla, like we're not solution finders, right? That a lot of times our kindness is simply being with and present with other people. Yeah, Steve, good thought on this idea of like gender here, that maybe culturally I've been conditioned as a fixer. So this idea of kindness as just bearing witness that's not what I've been taught I'm supposed to be doing, right? Not everyone needs a fix. Being present with people and being kind. So, you know, in those meetings, when someone's presenting an idea that you really don't like and you feel the need to fix their idea, one idea might be thinking about instead, like, what do I need to just like listen to this in a kind way and validate this in a kind way? Or do I jump right to, here's all the reasons why I don't like that idea. And I think we should go with a solution that I come up with, right? And so that kindness allows us to be patient and allows us to be regulated with another person. Okay, but there's a really key ingredient to kindness and compassion that we haven't talked about yet. Remember, today's presentation is about sustaining a stance of genuine kindness. My goal for today, if I haven't been explicit enough, is for you to leave here with ideas of how you can authentically connect with the kindness you already have. I know you are already have kindness in your heart. Why would you have picked a job like this if you didn't? Okay. So for me, my goal is to really help you be able to authentically connect to that and sustain it over a career, right? We know that burnout and turnover is a big problem in the helping professionals. And so my goal is really to help you connect with this authentically. And there's a really important ingredient of compassion that helps it to sustain. And let's hear from Brene a little bit more about what that is.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because
most boundaried.
So I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay or get away with behaviors that are not okay. Then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. That's what I assumed. Yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought, my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving.
It's not just some like technique so that you can do that. That's really like a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness.
Yeah. Generosity, to assume the best about people, is almost an inherently selfish act, because the life you change first is your own.
You love yourself.
Yeah. And so my question is big, B-I-G. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this, because I will tell you, this isn't something I hear talked about a lot. This idea that in order for me to sustain genuinely kind relationships with other people, I have to be having boundaries. I have to have boundaries. I have to know how I recognize unkind behavior and how I address unkind behavior is part of the way I sustain in genuine kindness. I'm curious from y'all, like, what are your thoughts on this idea of like boundaries? Yeah, Anna, that like when I don't have a way to set boundaries internally, perhaps with my experiences too, that'll make things really leak out all over my life. Okay? That boundaries are a really important capacity to build. Yeah. I think a lot of us have felt like time and our jobs have made us need to create better boundaries to protect our peace. I really like that. Well, that idea of like boundaries are a way that I protect my authentic kindness. Please protect your authentic kindness. It is such a valuable thing you bring to this work. The families that we serve are in the worst moments of their life. They deserve someone who is genuinely and authentically kind. This is something we have to protect in ourselves. And April, I love this because we're going to actually talk a little bit about what does it look like to set a boundary around kindness. Okay. It's like I planted you in the audience, April, with this idea of like, what would that actually look like, right? Let's talk about it. So let's talk about how you would establish some boundaries. So the first thing I want to make sure that y'all realize about boundaries is people get boundaries wrong a lot in that they think the boundary is focused on other people's behavior. A boundary is what I will do, not what you will do, because I can't control what you will do, but I can control what I will do. So instead of you can't talk to me that way, which is something I can't control, it's here's what I will do if you talk to me in that way. With a team, it's you can't talk to the team that way isn't a boundary we can set. Here's what the team will do if an individual is unkind is something that we can set. So I'm curious from you, what are boundaries that we can set that prevent unkind behavior from entering into our work lives? Okay. Do y'all have any examples of rules or boundaries that you've created within the context of your work that minimize the level of unkindness that can be present in the work that you do? Anybody have examples of this? I'll give it a minute. You know, on this side, I can't ever tell when you're typing. So I'll just give you a minute in case somebody's typing. Yes, that's the essence of this, Wyletta, is I can't control what you do, but I can control what I do in response to what you do. And I can control the environment that I set that focuses on responses. Okay, so let me give you an example of how this showed up in clinical work. I had this client who was transferred to me. Okay. He was an adolescent boy with a very complex trauma history. And one of the ways that complex trauma history showed up is his use of a lot of unkind language at a very high volume. Okay. He was one of those clients where like kind of everybody in the surrounding offices knew when he was in session because he was so loud and his language was pretty aggressive. Okay. And so this case gets transferred to me. And I think about, like, what are kinds of boundaries that I could put into place that would help this session and this work to be kinder? Okay. And so one of the things that happened is within our first session, things started to escalate and he started to yell and use profanity. And one of the things I told him is, this is a place where you're allowed to feel what you genuinely feel. I am not going to be someone that tells you certain feelings are okay and certain feelings are not okay. That's not what this is. And we're in a clinic and we're forming a relationship with each other. And certain behaviors are going to get in the way of us forming the kind of relationship that is helpful. But also, we're in a place where other people are doing work too. And so let's talk about how anger is okay. And let's talk about how screaming profanities in the middle of a child clinic isn't okay, right? Because this is an expression of your feelings that wouldn't be promoting a trusting relationship with us and wouldn't be promoting a kind environment. And so we're allowed to be angry. We're probably not allowed to use profanity against my therapist, right? That's not something that's allowed. And so a boundary would be is, if you start to use profanity against me, here's what I will do. Not that you can't, because I can't control what you do, but here's what I would do in response to this, right? And so I'm curious from y'all, have you ever been on teams that have explicit boundaries about unkind behavior? Like what we would do if someone shows up as their unkind self, if someone starts yelling in the middle of a staff meeting, if someone starts behaving and acting snide or rude or mean to a colleague, how does your team manage that? Does your team know how to manage those things yet? Because I will tell you, one way to sustain kindness is to make sure we have ways to handle unkindness when it comes, right? So that's something to spark for you to be thinking about a little bit more. Okay, because I want to avoid an idea of toxic positivity today. Okay, we've been talking a lot today about sustaining kindness and having kindness be at the front of what we're doing with families and with colleagues. But kindness is not the only virtuous emotion and behavior, and it's really not the only emotion that brings up for us in our work, right? When we asked you in the beginning, it wasn't just kindness, it was also frustration, burnout that came up for us. Okay. By the way, Martha's asking, like, what did you tell the client you would do when he displayed in that way? I told him, like, we're taking a break from session. So for me, like, when you do that, I'm going to walk you out to the waiting room. We're going to wait for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to bring you back in session and see if we can do this in a different way. All right. So that was one example. That's with one client. That's not like the right way to set a boundary, by the way. I hesitate to do that because I don't want people to think that's the right thing. That was a thing we tried with this client, was talking about in this space, how do we handle when unkindness comes up, right? And so let's talk about avoiding toxic positivity, because I don't want you leaving here thinking, okay, great, well, I've got to be kind and kind all the time, because that's not genuine. We don't feel kind all the time. We don't feel good about our work all the time. So I want you to get some ideas of managing the dialectic. I think often different cultures have beautiful ways of talking about different issues. And so this is a Cherokee parable I want to share with you. And I'm going to read it in case people have visual differences that makes it hard for them to read the slide. So a Cherokee parable between an elder and a child. A fight is going on inside me, the elder taught the young boy, a fight between two wolves. The dark one is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And he continued, the light wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you, child, and inside every other person on the face of this earth. And the child ponders this for a moment and then asked, which wolf will win? And the elder smiled and simply said, the one you feed. Some of you might have heard this parable before. Oh, Beth, it sounds like you've heard this before. I had heard this before, and I didn't realize there was a second part to this parable. Because for me, this first part of the parable could accidentally enforce an idea of toxic positivity, that we have to only feed the happy parts of our work and only fake when we're feeling a negative thing. We just have to be the positive light wolf all the time, right? But this can accidentally reinforce that. So I want you to hear the rest of the parable. The elder continued, if you feed them right, they both win. You see, if I only choose to feed the light wolf, the dark wolf will be hiding around every corner waiting for me to become distracted or weak and jump to get the attention he craves. He will always be angry and will always fight the light wolf. But if I acknowledge him, he is happy and the light wolf is happy and we all win. For the dark wolf has many qualities: tenacity, courage, fearlessness, strong-willed, and great strategic thinking that I have need of at times. These are very things that the light wolf lacks, but the light wolf has compassion and caring and strength and the ability to recognize what is in the best interest of all. So you see, son, the light wolf needs the dark wolf at his side. To feed only one would starve the other, and they will both become uncontrollable. How you choose to interact with the opposing forces within you will determine your life. Starve one or the other, or guide them both. And what I want to leave you with in this presentation is the idea that there is space for the moments you don't feel kind to. You need a space and a productive outlet for all the emotions this job brings up in you. So yes, we've been talking about kindness and love and compassion, and those are really important things. And what I will tell you is it's going to be hard for you to sustain those things genuinely if you don't have an outlet for the other emotions this work brings to you, the anger, the frustration. And what I will tell you is there's good things about those emotions too. I will tell you that anger makes me a better testifier on the stand, an advocate for my kids sometimes, that frustration. that maybe if I was in my light wolf, I wouldn't always be as strong an advocate as I needed to be for the families that I serve. Okay. And so to simplify the last hour for you, kindness is a gift that we give to ourselves and to others. It's a key predictor of connection, and a lack of kindness can lead to burnout. So I hope what that lets you know is kindness is important within our work, and it's important for sustaining. And that the easiest and most straightforward way to sustain kindness is actually to genuinely feel it more often. So instead of faking it, how do I actually genuinely feel connected to kindness more often? And the ways that we can do that is honoring our genuine emotions that we feel, getting away from that performance art and emotion labor, setting up important boundaries with how we handle when things are unkind, creating outlets for all the emotions that you feel in your job, and returning to that stance of, I believe the best in others. That benevolence idea can help us to sustain kindness over time. Okay. And, you know, an hour is not a lot of time to spend with each other, but I'm hopeful that what this hour did for you was reconnect you to the genuine kindness that you feel, maybe spark for you some ideas of what are boundaries or rules or stances that I need to create in my life that helps me stay consistently kind with others. Okay. And that the last thing I want to just express to you is gratitude. Thank you for the good work that you are doing on behalf of very vulnerable community members for us. That quote by Janice Stanfield at the bottom, that I cannot do all the good the world needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do, is a very sustaining idea for me in my job. And I hope that presentations like this remind you of the kind and incredible person you are and the work that you are doing. Okay. And so you deserve credit, by the way, for all this good work that you are doing. And so folks often ask us, like, how do I get CEUs? You're going to receive an email with the address you use to register for this webinar. So it might be your work address. It might be like a Gmail address you use. It's going to contain a survey link. Once you complete the survey, it's going to ask you to input a code. That code is 2170. That is the code. Okay. When you input that code, you will receive a CEU within the next couple of days to that email. Okay. You can always email out to us at ARBEST info if in case that you are not getting that CEU, but give it a couple days. Okay. It takes some time, but you need to fill out that survey and put in that 2170 code in order for it to, the system to generate your CEU. Okay. Oh, Cindy, that's a good question. Yes, I'm happy to share a copy of my slides. I'm going to put my email address in the chat right now. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to give you a copy. Also, we recorded this webinar and we have a YouTube page that has all our recorded webinars on it. And so you can always revisit this later as well through our YouTube page or discover other webinars that we have done. Okay, so I'm going to stop share at this time, but thank you so much for spending an hour with us on a Friday. It was great talking with all of you, and please sign up for future webinars through ARBEST as well. It's our pleasure to bring you this type of content every month. Oh yeah, sure. Let me see whether I can also grab that link really quick for you for our YouTube channel. Here it is. This is the link for our YouTube channel that has a lot of our old webinars on it, so you can go in and do some learning. Oh, thank you, Martha. I hope that this was really refreshing for you and just a reminder to get back to the reason why we do this work together. Thank you, Laura, for that reminder of the code. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your Friday. Thank you for spending some time with us today. Bye-bye, everyone.